And this is something that I thought was super interesting to me. So there was a federal investigation involving the Department of Labor, and they were looking into a number of sewing contractors here in the United States, and they found that a number of them were violating the overtime laws. So if you're not from here, or maybe you're just not in the loop, if you are an hourly employee at a company or for any type of business, and you work over 40 hours a week, you are supposed to get time and a half. So if you work 50 hours, the last 10 hours, say you make like $20 an hour, the last 10 hours of that 50 hours, you're supposed to be getting paid $30 an hour instead of $20. I believe, time and a half. I believe that's about right. So let's check this out. This is from, and by the way, everything I'm talking about is linked in the description box if you want to check it out on your own. This is from the media outlet LAist.com. Feds recover $1.1 million for garment workers after sewing contractors allegedly withheld overtime pay. Ugh, yikes. Federal regulators announced that $1.1 million in back wages and damages were recovered for 165 garment workers in Los Angeles. The settlement came after regulators reached a settlement with 4 sewing contractors who allegedly tried to hide that they withheld overtime wages. The settlement is the biggest to date for California garment workers, according to the Department of Labor on Wednesday. The contractors involved included those operated by Raymond Tecum, Maricela Romero, and Joseph DeLau. The trio owned Good Cash LLC and its associated entities, Good Cash Inc., Premium Quality Apparel LLC, and Premium Quality Apparel Inc. Now, from what I understand, these sewing contractors are hired by different clothing companies to make clothing for, different labels. Federal investigators allege these people had employees working 52 hours a week, but failed to pay overtime wages. They're also accused of forging payroll records and administering fake checks to conceal their illegal pay methods. LAist contacted the attorney representing the trio via email, but did not receive an immediate response. Department of Labor attorney Carrie Panasonic, sorry, I'm going to be butchering some of these names, said it was shocking to see the lengths the employers went to try to avoid getting caught. When we executed the inspection warrant, they actually turned off the power to the facility and told the employees to leave, and they all rushed out of the building. During the investigation, the department applied a hot goods hold on clothes made by the contractor's workers for Beyond Yoga. The hold made it illegal to ship goods that violated the Fair Labor Standards Act or child labor laws within a 30-day window. Panaccione said that when Beyond Yoga found out about the violations, the company immediately paid $582,000 and $317 in back wages and an equal amount in damages. It wasn't the first time federal labor regulators encountered Tecum, Romero, and DeLau. Panaccione said the trio paid back wages after an investigation revealed they violated the Fair Labor Standards Act in 2021. All right, fun times here. Panaccione said the garment workers are one of the most vulnerable populations of workers. Federal regulators conducted a garment workers survey in LA in 2023 and found that 80% of workers were being exploited in some way or another. Panaccione reminded workers they have the right to report labor violations to state or federal regulators. And we're going to talk about that because I've got some resources to share with you. If they contact us, we will do everything we can to protect their confidentiality, she said, and they do have the right under the law, no matter the circumstances, to make complaints to us about whatever situation they're in, and their employer does not have the legal ability to punish them in any way for that. So pretty interesting stuff there. And I think so here's, I saw this story this week and I was looking into it a little bit more, and I think the thing that I found the most concerning for me is that I think a lot of us think we're now conditioned to already know, hey, if something's made overseas, these items may not be made in the most ethical way. And we're kind of already, I think, conditioned to understand that. But I do think there's kind of a false sense of security in purchasing things that with the Made in the USA label. We kind of think, hey, if I'm buying Made in the US or Made in America, it almost kind of gives you a clean conscience. You're like, oh, well, everyone's getting paid paid fairly. No one's being exploited. The working conditions are much better. And I think stories and situations like what I just shared with you is why that's not always true. And I've been in situations myself where my employer was kind of skirting the rules like that. Let's just say that. I think a lot of companies, not even just narrowed to garment workers or factory workers, but a lot of employers will try to get out of paying you, whether it be overtime pay or like doing the thing where you're you get like a lunch break, but then you never get to take the lunch break, that sort of thing. That's happened to me a lot. And I do think this is kind of eye-opening that no matter where items are made, as far as clothing goes, there could be workers that are being taken advantage of. So I thought that was an interesting article. And I mean, just from personal experience, I will share this with you. I'm a former news producer, and I've worked for TV stations, and I worked at a network for the last 5 years of my career. Now, it's very common in the media industry for employees to be exploited like that. It's super, super common. So one example is TV stations, media outlets, newspapers, I'm sure do this too, radio stations. They will kind of get around paying you overtime by giving you a salary. So you'll be, and salaried workers are exempt from overtime. But here's the catch with that is that when I was a salaried employee, okay, for real, my salary at the first job I ever had in television, I was a morning show producer, and my salary was $20,000 a year. I think that worked out to be like $8 an hour if I was working 40 hours a week. But the thing is, I wasn't working 40 hours a week. I was usually working at least 50 hours a week. And because I was quote unquote salary, the company did not have to pay me overtime, even though I was literally making like $8 an hour. And this was a job that required a college degree. First job out of college. Again, it's supposed to be like your first, big girl job or whatever. And I was working in some cases I was working I think one time I had a shift that was close to 24 hours. Now, it was like a natural disaster, but I was not paid anything. Like, that's the thing. These employers get away with it by, again, giving you a salary but you're expected to be at work for like crazy amount of hours. So that's something that happened to me personally. And thinking back on it, you're like, why did I put up with that? And the other thing is they would do is, so if I was getting paid per hour and I was working like 55 hours a week, that's less than minimum wage. So I was definitely getting paid less than minimum wage, working as a news producer at a TV station out of college. The other thing is that they would do is, instead, like, say you worked, oftentimes you would have to fill in for other people or work extra. So say I had to work on a Saturday or like on the weekends, they wouldn't pay you any overtime. What they would do is my employer would do something called comp days. So if I worked 6 days in a week, instead of getting any extra money, which honestly I probably would have preferred the extra money. And this is why I do think a lot of jobs, I think maybe the salary thing should have like, you can only salary an employee if they're making a certain amount of money. But I'm sorry, having an employee salaried at like $20,000 a year is a joke. Getting no overtime and having to work way over 40 hours a week. So, but they would do this thing called comp time. So if I say, like, if I was working, and I was on the overnight shift too. So not only was this like a really crappy job, way over 40 hours a week, but it was overnight. So my shift was technically from 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. But in order for me to like do everything, I would typically have to come in early. So I would come in at like 10 or 10:30. And often I wasn't getting out of the building until 9 a.m. So it was very common for me to work 8-10 hour shifts. Going back to the comp days too, is that, so say I worked a Saturday, instead of giving me any more money, they would allow me to use that day sort of as vacation day another day. So that's how this company I worked for got around paying a lot of people overtime, was by doing the comp days and then by having you be on salary, even though the salary is like 20 grand a year. So that's one thing that I experienced personally. And again, I was not a garment worker or a sewing, I didn't work in a sewing factory, but that's one way that my employer definitely exploited a lot of the employees there. And this is very common in the media industry. So, in fact, it's probably very common in many industries, not just media. But reading that really kind of, it just made me angry for all of those people, and just that, there is such a thing as wage theft, and that's happening to a lot of people everywhere, not just overseas. So I think that's one reason why I'm personally glad I can sew my own items, is because, again, you might think, hey, if something's made in America or it's made in the United States, it's cool. And clearly it's not. So let's take a look at a few other resources. All right, so this is from the Department of Labor. Okay, so this is the official press release from this same story. So I just kind of want to, and it has a lot of the same information as the LAist article. But I thought this was pretty, I don't know, it's interesting. I'm really glad the Department of Labor is putting out news releases like this, just so we can get all of the information. So again, this is from the official source. A lot of it is the same information as the article. Okay, here is a good quote here. Garment workers are often subject to stringent production requirements and receive some of the lowest wages in the country, said Wage and Hour Administrator Jessica Lumen. The garment industry employment model involves multiple layers of contractors and subcontractors and leaves workers vulnerable to wage theft and exploitation. This case demonstrates that the Wage and Hour Division will hold to account employers across the supply chain to ensure that workers receive the pay they have earned and the rights they are afforded to by law. So this is pretty interesting. And you know what? I'm glad they're cracking down on these companies and on these people, because this is illegal activity. And again, this is an example of unethical business practices. So, good for the, again, I know we rarely ever say this, but good for the feds. So they also cited a good cash, but look at how many they were able to get, over $1 million in back wages for these people. That's a lot of money for about 165 people. So I thought this was pretty interesting. And just more tidbits. Federal law prohibits retaliation, harassment, intimidation, or adverse actions against employees who assert their workplace rights. An employer cannot retaliate, harass, or intimidate workers for exercising their rights or for receiving wages they are owed as a result of the department's investigation. Okay. Employers who steal hard-earned wages from workers who produce their goods may incur penalties that disrupt the operations of their distributors and cause production to fall short of customers' expectations, as the enforcement of the hot goods provision in this case shows, explained Solicitor of Labor Seema Nanda. To avoid potential liability, businesses must monitor their supply chains closely to make sure the goods they purchase are made legally. Good information here. A 2022 Wage and Hour Division survey of 50 Southern California garment sewing contractors and manufacturers found violations in 80% of cases, leading to the recovery of more than $892,000 in back wages and liquidated damages for 296 workers. So here's some information too. If you believe you are being taken advantage of, there are some channels you can take if you want to report an employer or some type of business for this type of activity. But I thought this was pretty interesting stuff here. All right, let's go to a different tab here. So I want to share this, and this is the Apparel Contractor Guide to Compliance under the Fair Labor Standards Act. So I thought this was a pretty good little brochure here. Basically kind of lays out that the federal minimum wage is currently $6 and so it's currently is it still $7.25 per hour? And I know that differs per state. It also details all of the overtime regulations. So if you do have questions or if you want to just read up on this, I thought this was a pretty good little resource here. It also talks about the hot goods, pieces made in violation of the wage or overtime laws. And that's the thing, I think we would kind of assume that things are better here in the United States, but there's still things like this happening here, and that is pretty unfortunate. Here's another good resource that I found, and that is this is from the U.S. Department of Labor blog, The Exploitation of Garment Workers, Threading the Needle on Fast Fashion. And this is where they found that this is the blog where they talked about the survey where they found that 80% of contractors were violating minimum wage and overtime laws. It also talks about fast fashion. I thought this was pretty interesting. So it says, consumers have a real choice to make. Fast fashion refers to trendy clothing that is quickly and cheaply produced to meet ever-changing consumer demand. Fast fashion garment makers copy ideas from high-end or celebrity fashion designers to sell the latest styles at cheaper prices. We've seen fast fashion all over the place here. These garment producers are caught in the never-ending cycle to rapidly produce the newest clothes or at lowest cost for consumers. As a result, many garment producers, manufacturers, and retailers sacrifice workers' wages to ensure that they can make a profit. So what can you do about it? Investing in more expensive pieces may be costly in the short term, but the higher quality means it won't be replaced as quickly, and you can't put a price on the benefits of ensuring fair wages for your fellow humans. Low-wage garment workers are our priority. The Wage and Hour Division will not tolerate wage theft in the fashion industry. We are committed to protecting the workplace rights of garment workers and ensuring they receive the full wages they are due. We will use all available enforcement tools to hold manufacturers and contractors accountable when they violate these rights. The exploitation of workers is never an acceptable price to pay for the clothes on your back. So good information here. And here is the, I believe this is the study. Okay, so if you want to read more about the study, the fiscal year 2022 survey also found that 32% of contractors paying garment workers piece rate wages, a practice prohibited by the state of California as of January 1st, 2022. Okay, so they're doing something illegal. Contractors and manufacturers included in the survey produce garments for sale by national retailers that include Bombshell Sportswear, Dillard's, Lulu's, Neiman Marcus, Nordstrom, Socialite, Stitch Fix, and Von Maur. In a particularly egregious case, division investigators learned a contractor paid garment workers as little as $1.58 per hour. Ugh. Oh boy. Wow. Despite our efforts to hold Southern California's garment industry employers accountable, we continue to see people who make clothes sold by some of the nation's leading retailers working in sweatshops, said Wage and Hour Regional Administrator Ruben Rosales in San Francisco. Many people shopping for clothes in stores and online are likely unaware that the Made in USA merchandise they're buying was in fact made by people earning far less than the U.S. law requires. Pretty interesting here. As part of the survey, the division conducted time and pricing studies and found that sewing fees paid by manufacturers to contractors were, on average, not enough for the contractors to properly pay their workers required minimum wages. Specifically, the studies determined the average sewing fee was $2.75, below the amount needed per garment for sewing contractors to comply with federal wage standards. Contractors who paid employees in compliance with the law received a higher sewing fee, ranging from $17.50 to $35 per garment. The findings of the Southern California Garment Survey highlight why greater outreach and stronger enforcement are needed to combat the inequities that exist in the garment and fashion industries. Rosales added, the Hour and Wage Division will continue to work and meet with advocates and industry stakeholders and remained focused on holding accountable the manufacturers and retailers who reap significant profits while the people who did the hard work are often not paid their rightful wages. So, yes, if you would like to, I believe there's a way that you can report, but yeah, you can definitely report things if you know anything, or if you are one of these people affected, you can report this to the Wage and Hour Division of the Department of Labor. So I thought that was good information. And here is the website for the Wage and Hour Division. And here, right on the homepage, how to file a complaint. So if you are one of these people affected, I would definitely encourage you to consider filing a complaint, because, you know, this, if you're making less than minimum wage, that's illegal. And I know many of us have been in those situations, and it's unfortunate that this is happening, but it's happening. And we've seen with these news releases that it's happening everywhere, not just overseas, not just in third world countries, but even in first world developed countries, including the United States.